Welcome in, guys, and welcome back to the Marshall Experience. Appreciate you guys being here. Tonight, basically simple and sweet. We're going to be doing the same thing, kind of go through these starting wide receivers and rank them how we feel they're going to do in fantasy this year. Before we get into that, obviously, though, we're going to thank our partner over at Lounge Media. If you have not gone and checked them out yet, go give them a follow and a subscribe, guys. It's completely free. It helps you, help us. If you want the content, we got it for you. So we're going to jump right into this tonight. I think we got possibly a lengthy one ahead of us. So we're going to get right into this. Appreciate everybody being here, and we'll get to the chat as soon as we get done. So again, tonight, running our wide receiver rankings. Basically kind of like 1 through 35, and then we'll talk about a couple people that maybe aren't on here that could potentially be on this list once they find a team or have after their rookie season, perhaps. So the top 5 here, we'll go through and we'll just talk about league winners. League winners here, I have number 1, right? My wide receiver 1, I have Jamaar Chase. Simply put, I think he's still the elite alpha. The ceiling is wide receiver 1 overall, and then the risk is low. This is some other things that we'll cover today is kind of the ceiling and the risk that is involved in drafting this player. And we'll kind of explain the risk if it's medium or high, but basically it's low, just meaning that there's really little to risk and their consistency is there. So again, we have Chase's as a wide receiver 1. Basically, I mean, Chase is a perennial first round fantasy pick, right? He was the popular first overall selection last year and really mostly for the most part lived up to it. He became the 3rd player ever with 125 plus receptions in back-to-back seasons. He also finished 2025 with a career high and league leading 185 targets. Now, this didn't necessarily match his fantasy production as he went down from 9.8 to 7.6 in yards per target. Now, this is with Joe Burrow hurt, right? But even in that fact, with Joe Flacco under center last year, Chase averaged an absurd 14.4 targets per game, producing around those weeks 20 to almost 22 points per game in the fantasy world. So now with Flacco re-signed for this year, why I bring that up is no matter if Burrow's out, I think that we can guarantee that Chase will be the number 1 guy moving forward, which again, wide receiver 4 as of last year. I think that, he's again positioned for an every down role in a pass heavy offense. Even the running back is involved in the passing game. So number 2, we'll get into Puka Nacua. Again, another elite alpha. I think his ceiling could be wide receiver 1 overall. The risk for me is a little bit more on the medium side just because of the simple fact that Devontae Adams is there. You also have a decent running back room in Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. So I just think the room is a little bit more unfavorable in his fantasy world than Jamaar Chase. Not saying that he couldn't out target Jamaar Chase because I think he really could. I think we'll get into our bold predictions later, but I think that Puka Nacua could have a heck of a year. So more on Puka Nacua. Never was the first round talent, was famously the 5th round talent, right? Came right out of the gate with a rookie record. 1486 in receiving yards. He then led the NFL in yards per route ran in 2024, and then a knee injury limited him to 11 regular season games. Now, healthier last year, Nacua again led the league in yards per route run at 3.8, only this time across 16 regular season games instead of 11, and averaging a wide receiver leading 23.5 points per game. His route share at 75.1% was still low relative to other top wideouts, but again, that's That's with Devontae Adams there and stuff like that. Now, Puka Nacua did finish as the wide receiver 1 last year. And that's why I said, even with Devontae Adams, wide receiver 1 is, in fact, his ceiling. So, again, I'm more on the low medium side on the risk, but I would lean towards the medium just because of the target share. Devontae Adams led the league in touchdowns last year at 14. I believe it was. So there's a plenty of Matthew Stafford talent to go from Puka to Devontae to the running room to whatever tight end they feel like it throwing at you. But it is Puka Nacua, and I do believe that Devontae Adams is not in his prime anymore. So we can definitely say that Puka Nacua is currently the better wide receiver for Matthew Stafford. So at number 3, I do have JSN. His category I would have as a breakout superstar, a little young to be that elite alpha, I think, yet. But again, a huge year last year. I think, in fact, that his ceiling is also wide receiver 1 overall. I do see that risk being a little medium, and it's actually quite the opposite than Puka Nacua. But I'm more worried about, can Sam Darnold repeat that year back to back? I think that possibly, but I've seen a little bit too much of Sam Darnold in my time to put money on that. So now JSN did receiver 2 last year. So again, I think that ceiling is that wide receiver 1 to take that next step. Now, this time last year, JSN was really facing questions about his transition from the full-time slot work to more of a perimeter-oriented role under Clint Kubiak, right? So now Clint Kubiak is now gone. After that, now with Kubiak, he has an Offensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl ring, plus a spot on the top 10 of the single-season receiving list. Heck of a year, right? Kubiak now gone, I think, does affect that. However, he led the NFL in receiving yards from the perimeter on the outside after leading in the slot yardage the year before. In the question, JSN did all that in an offense that ranked 29th in pass attempts with Smith, and then last year it kind of improved with Sam Darnold. But they had Kenneth Walker, they had Charbonnet. Now they have Jadarian Price and Zach Charbonnet. So could we see the uptick in the pass attempts? I think you could. And I think that's why JSN could finish top 3 this year. Something for me on number 4, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Okay. Amon-Ra I would category really as the PPR monster. Okay. Simply put, PPR monster. If you own a PPR, if you are in a PPR league, which means by the catch, per catch, half a point per catch, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the PPR monster in this league. I do think that the ceiling for Amon-Ra is that wide receiver 2 overall, though. I just think that Gibbs, Jameson Williams, Sam LaPorta, they have a high-octane offense. He is obviously the lead in that. I just think personally that wide receiver 2 is probably the ceiling for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Last year was wide receiver 3, heck of a year. Really as disappointing as it was for the Lions. It proved to be another fruitful year for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He ripped off the 3rd straight season in a range of 115 catches to 119 catches and 10 to 12 touchdowns. So sacrificing some efficiency while piling up on the career high receptions and 100 targets. I apologize. Had at 172. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson was the only wide receiver with more slot yardage, and Amon-Ra also finished a respectable 16th in yards from the perimeter. So he was kind of working both spots last year. He was working that slot spot. He was working the outside. He is a big part in their offense. Now, obviously, the Ben Johnson departure may have shifted the balance, but that was a year ago. I don't think that we saw Detroit kind of fall off a little bit, but again, I don't think that it was against Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think the fantasy production is definitely still there. I do have the risk is low just because he is the main guy in that offense. But yeah, I have Amon-Ra at the top of the list here. Next guy we'll talk about at 5 to round out CeeDee Lamb. Okay, CeeDee Lamb I think has a pretty big year. I think that Dak Prescott may have a healthier year than years past, and they're gonna tick that up in offense and in the passing offense. Again, I have categorize him under high passing offense, a lot of targets, a lot of volume. Excuse me. I do have his ceiling as well overall, though, meaning and his risk at medium, both being the reason of George Pickens. We'll get into George Pickens a little bit later, but I think that George Pickens is on the path to on a franchise tag year. He's looking for a contract. He's on a contract year, so we could see George Pickens really have a great breakout year to earn him a contract in Dallas or somewhere else. But I mean, more on CeeDee Lamb. I missed just 6 games through 6 NFL seasons. But 5 of those occurred in the past 2 years. So recently, we've not had a great track record, but overall, I think it's fantastic track record. I think injuries also limiting in his playing time, obviously, in another handful of games. Lamb still cleared 1,000 yards in both of those years, still missing games, giving him 5 straight 1,000-yard receiving since falling a bit shy back in 2020 as a rookie. Your wide receivers offer a similar combination of downfield threat ability and the yards after catch ability. Really just allows him to produce that in the fantasy world, right? In fantasy terms, I think that George Pickens' emergence slightly lowers Lamb's volume ceiling than the team is at full strength. Now, I do think that they will turn to Dak Prescott to lead this offense. I do think that Dak Prescott prefers to pass the ball, especially when you have arguably 2 all-pros. I could see him and Pickens both being top 15. And we'll talk about Pickens a little bit later. Now, at number 6, I have Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers suffered an ACL and meniscus tears in week 4 last year, bringing the early end to what could have been a prolific campaign for him. He averaged almost 11 targets over the first 3 weeks after averaging a league high 11.3 during his 2024 rookie season. The strong start last year came with Russell Wilson at quarterback, and then they got into Jackson Dart, right? I think that now this year they get a full year of Jackson Dart, who's been working together. He comes off injury. I think they've added to the wide receiver room pretty solidly. OBJ, Juju Smith-Schuster. You still have Darius Slayton. You still have Malik Nabers. I think it's pretty decent. I think this gives an opportunity to have Malik Nabers be that alpha, be that guy. Do have his ceiling at wide receiver 3. The low would be the risk. I would have the risk at low, and being is I think he's got to be a bounce back candidate for something, right? I mean, he didn't finish half the year last year, and the talent's never been an argument. And I think the quarterback is finally finding his stride. So somebody has to pick up that slack, and somebody has to build that connection with Dart, so that way they both can build off of that. Number 7, I do have Drake London. Okay, so for Drake London, max target share, I do have wide receiver 5 and medium risk. And medium risk is meaning more of because of the quarterback situation. I'm not necessarily a fan of either Penix or Tua for his quarterback situation. So, whether it's one or the other, he's going to get the targets now. You know what I mean? Darnell Mooney's gone. You still have Bijan, obviously. Pitts is gone. you have some targets definitely coming your way. Um, Again, medium risk just because of the quarterback situation. Now, London entering this fifth season has yet to experience really even league average quarterback play, dealing with a different starter each year that he has played in the league. Okay. Obviously, we know it's going to be either Tua or Michael Penix recovering from his ACL. For London, Bijan, or I'm sorry, Kyle Pitts is still on there. I apologize. I thought he ended up getting signed in somewhere else. New coaching staff, Kevin Stefanski, Tommy Rees, the new offensive coordinator. I think it could mean wonders for these offensive superstars. I don't think that necessarily Raheem Morris was the guy, and Raheem Morris is a defensive coach, in my opinion, and Zach Robinson was never the guy for the job. So hopefully they can find somebody that can really tune into these guys and get the full talent, and project that they are that talented, because I do believe that they are. At number 8, we're going to talk about Justin Jefferson. Okay, Justin Jefferson, I have at 8. Now, some say a little high, some say a little low, honestly, and it's never been about the talent. Okay, never been about the talent. I do think that he's a bounce back candidate if Kyler Murray is at quarterback. Simply put, he's an elite talent with quarterback concerns. Okay, top 8 was the highest finish last season for the week. And wide receiver 21 is how he finished. Okay, but I think that's by far, I didn't look back into it, but off the top of my head, that is by far the worst finish for Justin Jefferson in fantasy. And it has to come down to quarterback play. If it's J.J. McCarthy, I think my bold take later might be right about Justin Jefferson. But if it's Kyler Murray, I could see both Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Kyler Murray. I could see this whole offense having a pretty decent year, depending on if Kyler Murray can get into the Kevin O'Connell offense or not. Now, Justin Jefferson, he has 87 yards per game in each of his NFL seasons. Obviously, that's an unmatched level of consistency for the receiver that he is in the era of short passing attacks. He survived the transition from Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold to J.J. McCarthy, and now it could be Kyler Murray. It's just he needs somebody that's going to catch on to this Kevin O'Connell offense to really help lead that charge. Now, he has produced with other quarterbacks. Murray has helped DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona, so maybe he can do the same for Justin Jefferson down in Minnesota. So at number 9, I do have Terry McMillan. Okay, and some say a little high on that, but that's all right. I do think he's poised for a strong second year. As ceiling, I do have wide receiver 6, and I do have the low as the risk. Rookie of the year really can only go down from here, right? I do think that Bryce Young has only improved with him. I think that this is poised for a duo that can finally find a connection and lead that to where he can improve off of the 1,000-yard rookie season that he had, and Bryce Young can continue to climb up the rankings in the quarterback room. So I think that Tedoroa is poised for a strong second year. Couple of things on him. Obviously, quality starter from day one, right? Ultimately went over 1,000 yards. It was a little bit barely, but across the 17 games. And he finished 21st among wide receivers in PPR and 26th in yards per route. Now, I really don't think that he has much competition in Carolina either. Now, we think about Jalen Coker. Yeah, Jalen Coker kind of had a breakout year last year. Maybe he steps up this year and has even a better year. But Xavier Leggette's never been it. They kind of drafted Chris Braswell to figure out what that's about. I just think that Tedoroa is the guy. I think Bryce needs a guy to lean on to push this offense through, and I think that Tedoroa McMillan can really be that guy. So I have him at number 9. Number 10, I do have Nico Collins, touchdown and big play machine. right? Nico Collins is definitely the number one guy in CJ Stroud's offense. Number 5 I have is the ceiling here, and risk medium because of that reason. We saw Stroud have really a down year last year. What does that look like this year? Have they helped Stroud? Have they improved the offensive line? Jaden Higgins, does he take a next step in his next year? So, Jalen Noel. What does this look like? But I do think that Nico Collins' target share is there. I think he is definitely CJ Stroud's guy. And that's what you want in fantasy. You want a guy that is constantly going to get the targets, constantly going to get the volume, so that way you can have the most opportunities. That's what you really want. At number 11, A.J. Brown. Simply put, new quarterback. Big target share. Got traded to Patriots. We're not going to touch on that too much. I have my own opinions of Mr. A.J. in this current moment, but I don't know. New quarterback, right? Drake May. That's what he's been looking for. He's been looking for an alpha omega wide receiver 1 that he can throw the ball to. He got it. A.J. Brown is only going to benefit from that because of the reason that it happened is because Drake May is looking for a guy. Again, you just found it. So, A.J. Brown's fantasy season I could see arguably being a top 10 season. But we'll see. We'll see how you still got Demario Douglas. You still got Kayshon Boutte. You still got the running back room and Stevenson, Henderson, Hunter Henry in the tight end room. So, I mean, realistically, did he go from Philly to New England and is he upgrading in fantasy? I do believe so. He really wasn't getting the ball in Philly. Definitely an upgrade in that fact. To win more ball games, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. At number 12, I have his ex-running mate, Devontae Smith, and it's kind of the same reason. Same quarterback, new role, right? New role in the wide receiver 1 department. He is going to be the leader in target shares. Now, don't have the exact stats in front of me, but if you're curious enough and you were to go look at the stats compared from Devontae Smith to A.J. Brown since we have acquired A.J. Brown, they are quite identical. Devontae Smith, I'm telling you, is ready for this role. Simply put, he has been ready for this role. Steve Smith Jr. said it best on NFL Network the other day. He has been chomping at the bit, waiting for this opportunity, waiting to lead this wide receiver room, and I'm all here for it. I'm definitely excited for him. I can increase. Now, I do have his ceiling as a wide receiver 10. Okay, I don't think it's going to get too crazy. We still have Saquon. It's still, until proven otherwise, it's a run-first team to me. But when you go from just the deep ball threat to the alpha omega, it's going to do something in the fantasy world. I do have the medium risk because we don't know what the new offense is going to look like. Realistically, we don't. And again, until proven otherwise, I have to say run first offense because that's what we've been shown. Now, that 6 through 12 was high-end wide receiver guys that you could start and expect consistency. Now, this next group at 13 through 20 is going to be labeled as the strong wide receiver 2 with some wide receiver 1 weeks. Okay, so we're going to have these guys in the flex position. We're going to have these guys in the wide receiver 2 positions. But sometimes they're going to boom more than they are going to bust. At number 13, okay, I have Garrett Wilson. Some say a little high. I say that Geno Smith needs a freaking target, guys. Garrett Wilson's the best player on that team. Now, you can sit here and say Omar Cooper Jr., Sadiq. Yeah, it's cool. They're rookies. I'm talking about somebody that is an NFL. They are going to be able to lead this offense. Geno Smith is going to want a guy from day one. Garrett Wilson's going to be it. I think his target goes up. Geno Smith is a passer. He's not a guy to run out of the pocket. Like, he's going to let it go if he needs to. Okay, I do have his ceiling as wide receiver 10 and being more on the medium side. Number 4. Okay, I think Rome Odunze could possibly be this year's biggest fantasy riser. So for last year, let me look it up right here. Last year, he finished as wide receiver 41. Wouldn't even be on my list today. However, we've talked about Caleb Williams. We've talked about the potential that comes with this next year that could be pretty well for the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams and company. Rome Odunze is a part of that company. So I do have his ceiling a little bit higher at wide receiver 8. Now, risk, I do have it medium. Reason being, you still have Luther Burden. You still have, yes, the departure of DJ Moore, which increased Rome Odunze, but you still have Colston Loveland. You still have Luther Burden, right? You still have DeAndre Swift, Kyle Monangai, Cole Kmet. I mean, you have these guys that are going to step up. The Bears offense with DJ Moore, somebody's going to get those targets. And in my personal opinion, I think it's going to be Rome Odunze. And number 15, a guy we already talked about, George Pickens. Okay, for me, George Pickens has maybe one of the biggest massive ceilings that we can talk about today. Simply put, I think even as an Eagle fan, if Dak Prescott stays healthy all year, that offense with George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Javonte Williams, Flournoy, I mean, it's dangerous in the passing department. George Pickens could, if CeeDee Lamb is getting double teamed, especially with the slot guy, I mean, George Pickens is going to have one-on-one all day. He's talented enough to win those one-on-ones. So I have him as a top 15 with a massive ceiling. Wide receiver 8 as the ceiling, and just a medium risk, just because, again, CeeDee Lamb is definitely the guy in depth, but I do think that George Pickens is a year franchise tagged. I think he's trying for sure. So, and it's number 16, Chris Olave. Okay. Simply put, I think that it's an up-and-coming quarterback. Tyler Shuck is Chris Olave had a healthy year last year and finished as wide receiver 6, guys. Okay, Olave's career year was one of the feel-good stories of 2025. I will say that. Okay, after repeated trips to the concussion protocol left his playing future in doubt. Just a year earlier, he nearly played all 17 games last season, missing only week 18 to be treated for a blood clot in his lung. He is expected to be fine. Nothing to be worried about there. However, Olave finished north of 1,000 yards for a third time in 4 NFL seasons. He recorded career highs in targets at 156, catches at 100, and yards at 1163. Also, touchdowns at 9. Okay, so Tyler Shuck is definitely feeding the ball. Did finish in career lows, however, in yards per target and yards per catch. Okay, Olave led the NFL with 30 targets, 6 touchdowns on passes thrown 20-plus yards downfield. Left something on the table with 3 drops in that. So, is he the new deep threat in the NFL? Tyler Shuck seems to think so. Now, with Jordan Tyson entering this wide receiver room, yes, that's why I don't have Olave in the top 10 like he finished last year. I kind of had him step back a little bit. I think the production's there, but I do think that Jordan Tyson is going to eat into that a little bit. Low risk, wide receiver 10 ceiling. I do think it's low risk just because Jordan Tyson hasn't proved himself yet. Chris Olave is the guy for Tyler Shuck, and it proved last year when he finished wide receiver 6. Okay? Zay Flowers at number 17. I think that, a new OC. I think it's a run-first offense. That's why I kind of have him a little bit lower than most. Lamar, Derrick Henry, he's definitely the better out of Bateman, and Mark Andrews had a kind of off year. Not saying in that aspect, but I do think that it's a run-first offense when you look at the overall picture. I do have him at 17. Again, low risk. Wide receiver 10 is the ceiling. Last year, he did finish with career highs in catches. at 86. Not a lot of high volume there. Receiving yards at 1,200, though. So some deep catches, some long catches, and targets at 118. Okay, though his fantasy production was only marginally better than 2024's until he scored a pair of long touchdowns in the fourth quarter of a Week 18 loss. So, a lot of garbage time points there. Now, finished as wide receiver 7. Not bad. Just don't see that this year. Especially with them getting the Lane and I forget about the other rookie wide receiver they drafted. But Jacoby Lane's going to be a big part in that red zone offense when they get it inside the 20. So Zay Flowers is 17 again. 18, I have Emeka Egbuka. Okay. Mike Evans is out of town in Tampa. Baker Mayfield is going to need somebody to throw the ball to. A guy. Okay, you do have Jalen McMillan. You do have Chris Godwin still. Just nobody that can fill the Mike Evans aura, and we'll see if Emeka Egbuka can do that as well. I think he had an unusual rookie season. Okay, recorded 5 of his 6 touchdowns and 47% of his yardage within the first 5 weeks. We thought he was in route for Rookie of the Year last year. Then Tet took over, and he kind of fell off. Okay, he had one more big game, Week 10 at New England, before finishing out the year with no touchdowns and fewer than 11 PPR points in 8 straight contests. Egbuka even lost playing time over the final 3 to 4 weeks once Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan were healthy. Before that, it was poor efficiency, not a lack of volume that really crushed Egbuka's production. But from week 6 to 15, he averaged 8.8 targets and 53 snaps, yet scored just 1 touchdown while producing 3 catches for 47 yards. He did have a league-high tying 9 drops, right? That doesn't help. But a banged-up Baker Mayfield and an overmatched, really a new OC at that time also played roles. Okay. Now they have Zach Robinson. I'm not necessarily enthused with that replacement. Evans is off to San Francisco. I think it leaves a big 6'5" hole in the offense, right? I think the Egbuka's, he may be 6'1", but I think that he has the talent to possibly fill that role for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At number 19, we got Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey for Justin Herbert and company. Simply put, I think that's Justin Herbert's target. You have David Njoku, I think, who went over there. You have Quentin Johnson, who we could talk about later because he's in a special kid that's had 8 straight touchdowns in a couple of seasons. So, but simply put, for McConkey, it's just simply put volume, right? Wide receiver 12 is a ceiling with a low risk just because he's Justin Herbert's guy. I think the talent's there. I think that the target share's there. I just think that he maybe had an off year being wide receiver 30. I think the Chargers as a whole had a off year offensively. So we'll see if they can fix that. And number 20, a little high for some, or so I'm told. But at 20, I have Marvin Harrison Jr., okay? No matter who the quarterback is, Jacoby, or it's going to be Carson Beck, minus the Trey McBride, right? I think that he should be the alpha. He should be the wide receiver. Michael Wilson has kind of come out of his shell a little bit. But I think that Marvin Harrison is ready to prove why he's this breakout superstar and this generational talent that everybody thought he was. So I think that no matter who his quarterback is, he will have a fantasy relevant season. He will finish top 20. I do think it is a high risk, though, because regardless of who the quarterback is, Jacoby Brissett, a lot of turnovers, a lot of time on the field, perhaps. Carson Beck, rookie quarterback, never really a good situation. But if it is Carson Beck, it would probably be his best scenario, considering that rookie's always looking for a guy, but I'm afraid somebody could trade McBride. Moving into the next category, which is breakout candidates. This will cover 21 through 29. And to lead us off at 21, I do have T. Higgins. Okay, 21 for T. Higgins. Again, simply put, a high-octane offense, right? Joe Burrow and company. If Chase is doubled that day, T. Higgins is definitely getting the ball. Okay, I do have his ceiling at wide receiver 15 with a medium risk, just simply put, because it's Chase, right? Chase is the alpha in that room by far. And Burrow's favorite target, Joe Flacco's favorite target. So unless Chase goes down with injury, T. Higgins will always be the wide receiver 2 in that room. 22, I do have Jalen Waddle. Okay, I do think that I had Cortland Sutton and Jalen Waddle a little bit farther back, not because of talent, but because I think that they take a little bit from each other. Okay, new quarterback for Jalen Waddle. Is he the wide receiver 1? He's the wide receiver 1. You still have Mark Mims. You know, grounded wide receiver room is great for the team. It's not necessarily great for the fantasy production for the player. Ceiling, I do have wide receiver 18 and medium risk just because of the crowded room. Cortland Sutton's been there. He's been familiar with Bo Nix, Evan Ingram coming into year 2 in Denver. You know, it's just you're the new guy on the block. How does that fit in? Number 23, I do have Alec Pierce. Getting a lot of hate for this one. But I do think with Michael Pittman out of town, I think that Alec Pierce can step into this new role he's in, have a breakout year into potentially, really, guys, the wide receiver 1. I mean, Josh Downs, even with Pittman not there, I'm not sure that Josh Downs can really step up past being a returner. Had a few good games in the wide receiver room department, but Alec Pierce definitely led that group last year in fantasy. Okay, 24. I have Rashee Rice. Dominant one playing, basically. When he's not in trouble or he's not he's a dominant fantasy player. Not sure how much he's going to play this year. That's kind of why I have him at 24. Also why I have the risk at high. However, ceiling at wide receiver 18 I feel like is generous just because of the simple fact of who his quarterback is, Patrick Mahomes. And when Rashee Rice and Patrick Mahomes are on the field together, Rashee Rice goes up. Facts. 25, I have our first rookie here, Carnell Tate. Now, I know we've been high on Jordan Tyson. Okay? Looking deeper into this, Jordan Tyson has to compete with Olave when it comes to fantasy production. Jordan Tyson could still potentially win Rookie of the Year. We did predict that. We did have a bold prediction of that. Could still happen. However, I think that Carnell Tate in the situation that he's going to in Tennessee better fits the fantasy production in the fact that he will have a better fantasy year than Tyson. So I do have Tate at 25. Right, new toy for Cam Ward. Target share is going to be there. I think the only one he should have to compete with is Calvin Ridley. But in that fact, should he have to? I think if he impresses in camp, you drafted the guy for a reason. Use him. Tell him here's your guy. Show him that he is the guy. I think that benefits these young kids. Low risk, I think, because, again, I think you're looking at a high volume. I think Cam Ward and him should have a good repertoire. Maybe it's a little bit risky just because he's a rookie. But I do have his ceiling as wide receiver 21. And let me tell you why. And I did this for Tyson. And I did this for, just those two because I think those are the two that are Rookie of the Year capable. But 21 because that was Tet's ceiling last year. He finished wide receiver 21. I do not see these guys necessarily having a better year than did last year. I don't see them having a Puka year. I don't see them having those years that were the Sam Laporta rookie fantasy years. No. We're going to see around what Tet did last year, so I'm guessing 20 to 30 finish for these rookies. Brian Thomas Jr. at 26. He's a little bit lower, and I can simply put it this way. Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, there's some other wide receivers in that department. Um, I think the running back room could use some help over there in Jacksonville. However, I do think that their wide receiver room could be strong for Trevor Lawrence to have a big year. And we've talked about Trevor Lawrence a few times. But I think the person to lead that and a bounce back year, especially in fantasy and especially in his own locker room, I think would be Brian Thomas Jr. Um, wide receiver 15, I think, is the ceiling. I think he does have massive potential just because Lawrence could be passing the ball a lot this year. Have it as a low risk, maybe because of competition, but I think Lawrence could pass for 4,500 to 5,000 yards, guys. I mean, the running back room is not strong. Tootin and Chris Rodriguez is not an ideal situation. They very well could Trevor Lawrence and have him throw for a record year in Jacksonville team history. So I foresee that benefit in somebody's eyes, and I think all three could, realistically. 27, another new trade, another new destination, DJ Moore. Found a new team in Buffalo, new quarterback in Josh Allen. This could be the most benefited situation for anybody on this list. He goes from Caleb Williams, who had a crowded room, to now he went to Buffalo, where they just have him, Shakir, and maybe Kincaid, if you want to argue that, in the receiving department. But I think he's stepping into a heck of a situation. Josh Allen has thought he had in Shakir for the long. When it comes to playoffs, it's never been enough. So maybe DJ Moore is that final piece. I do have him at wide receiver 18 is the ceiling with a low risk just because it's Josh Allen. I think it's a high-octane offense. Good situation. 28, I do have Luther Burden. Okay. We talked about Rome Odunze already, and we'll just simply put it this way. Caleb Williams breakout. If that happens, these guys are going to benefit. Wide receiver 20 is the ceiling for me, though, with a medium risk, just because, again, Loveland, Odunze, Swift, Monangai. There's a lot of moving pieces there for me. Not to mention Luther Burden didn't have the strongest year last year. Tyson at time. Potential rookie of the year, like Darnell Tate. Target Olave, right? If Olave can continue to be healthy, I think that Tyler Shuck and company could really let this thing go. They did get a new running back in Trevor Etienne. Yes, they still do have Alvin Kamara, but we'll let you guys know those backs are superior in one thing. Not only one thing, but they have one thing in common, and that is pass-catching ability. That helps the quarterback and get the ball around and moves linebackers around a little bit. So I do think that Jordan Tyson will benefit again, ceiling at wide receiver 21, which Tet was at in medium risk, just because, again, rookie, a lot of moving pieces there. Olave is probably the alpha there, and that's the only difference between him and Tate, I think, is he's kind of guys that I haven't mentioned yet. Okay, these are kind of guys that, and I'll explain why. And if they can move up, they can move down, right? So at 30, I do have DK Metcalf. Main reason, I think the addition of Michael Pittman Jr. to the Steelers definitely hurt his fantasy value. I think it helped Aaron Rodgers exponentially. It hurt Metcalf because now he has to basically cut those target shares in half, not to mention Jalen Warren and company in the running back room. So, I'm hoping for a top 30 finish. I do have the ceiling as wide receiver 22, and that's basically banking on Aaron Rodgers having a heck of a season. High risk for me. Most of these are high risk, but high risk for me, Pittman, Fairmuth, Rodgers. There's a lot of questions surviving the Steelers offense, and I'm probably going to avoid that at all costs this year. Terry McLaurin at 31. Honestly, it's not the talent. Terry McLaurin's had some solid fantasy production. I'm honestly just worried about Daniels, because
McLaurin without Jaden Daniels is a different McLaurin. He feels like he has to put the team on his back, and then he ends up hurt or he just fumbles it. So, health of Jaden Daniels up in the air. I think that we could potentially see a top 25 finish for Terry McLaurin. Okay, now if Jaden Daniels can't learn how not to engage in a hit, I think you could see outside the top 30 definitely for Terry McLaurin. 32. I have Mike Evans, and it's just simply being it's a crowded room. I saw that today. Brandon Ayuk has an warrant out for his arrest. We're not sure what that's going to bring yet. So this could be a change of direction. However, you still have Ricky Purcell who wants to step up. You have CMC. You have George Kittle. Juwan Jennings is gone. Realistically, if Brandon Ayuk is not there, this could be a time for improvement. Because I don't think Brock Purdy's the problem. It's just if Ayuk's though, Purcell is there, Ayuk is there, Kittle's there, CMC's there. It's just a lot of mouths to feed. And feeding those many mouths don't really work out. 33. I have our next rookie in Mekhi Lemon. I do think it's a top 35 finish for Mekhi. A.J. Brown leaving, right? His targets just went up. He automatically comes the wide receiver 2 in that. I don't think that they, Wicks or Brown have necessarily earned that. I don't think I've seen any reports saying otherwise. I think Lemons looked sharp in training camp and OTAs. But simply put, his target share went up, guys. I was watching NFL Network today, and basically, I think they're correct. He could be up next to 65 catches next year. That's a decent rookie year, especially as a wide receiver too. So, I'll take that. I think fantasy-wise, that could be very, very relevant. Couple touchdowns on top of that with about 800 yards. I think that'll do for a rookie. Number 34, Jameson Williams. Just a high-octane offense. Jared Goff, Amon-Ra, Gibbs, a lot of moving pieces. However, Jameson Williams is the deep guy on that, right? Amon-Ra is the reception guy, the possession guy, the cut under, the really do all. But Jameson Williams has the speed and the deep threat ability to be that deep threat guy, and I think that's what keeps him fantasy relevant. I do have Jameson as a wide receiver 25 as a ceiling with a high risk just because, he's definitely not the number one guy there. I would say Gibbs, Amon-Ra are definitely the top two in that offense. So maybe he's number 3. Number 35, last guy on the list, Chimere Dike. Okay, and this is for more of the in-depth leagues. Okay, this is when you got to get into your settings. This is when you got to check your scoring and check if you get points for kick returns and punt returns, because a lot of these rankings do change when doing that. But I think that even Carnell Tate could benefit from the Dike emergence that I think is going to happen next year. But Dike is probably one of the best returners in the NFL, especially in the fantasy world last year. He kept himself fantasy relevant with just being a returner. So, I think that's a big thing. Cam Ward could be leaning on him more. He could be the third wide receiver in that set. And, he could be, like I said, more involved in the offense if you have punt return, kick return yards. Could be something. High risk, though, obviously. The volume's not there in the offense. And if you don't run any special team yardage and it's just catches and yards and touchdowns, that's probably something I would avoid. So we'll get into our 8 bold takes, and then we'll get you out of here. Number 1. Okay, number 1. And let me explain these bold takes because I've gotten a bunch of questions with them. These aren't necessarily predictions. They are, but these are more like outside of the box. I would like to seize, right? just for the fantasy purposes, just really the football world. They're a little bit on the bolder side. But some people have been like, whoa, that's kind of like, well, yeah, it's why it's called bold predictions, right? It's bold takes. Number one, JSN will finish as the wide receiver one. Okay, so again, bold take, because earlier we said that we didn't know if Sam Darnold was gonna, do what he did back-to-back years. But the bold take would be that he does redeem himself. He does have that consistency to where he can get JSN the volume that he did last year, to where JSN can produce that. I think that JSN could be. I think, they just have to turn the offense over to him. I think that they have to involve him like a Puka Nacua, like a Jamaar Chase. He has to become the guy. I think with Kenneth Walker gone, it could be a pretty possible thing. I also think that he leads the NFL in receptions. Okay. So he had a career high last year in receptions. I think that he will beat that, but I think that he will also lead the NFL in receptions. Number two, Malik Neighbors finishes top 3. For me, the talent is undeniable. If the Giants get even average quarterback play and he stays healthy, Neighbors is a fantasy monster. Okay. I think a top 3 finish could be on the horizon. Number 3, Justin Jefferson finishes outside the top 12 for the second straight year. Not but because of ability, but because Minnesota has a quarterback problem. Unsolved. And when solved, Addison, Hawkinson, they could take those opportunities from him. So, outside the top 12 for Justin Jefferson. Number 4, George Pickens outscores his running mate, CeeDee Lamb. And some of you are like, whoa, that's why they're bold. I think that George Pickens could, he's on a contract year, guys. He is going to be playing his arse off. I can't reiterate that enough. I'm as an Eagle fan, I'm kind of nervous because I really do think that him and Dak Prescott are going to have a connection this next year that's going to possibly hurt CeeDee Lamb. I think Dallas goes pass heavy and leans heavily on Pickens as their downfield alpha. Okay. Number 5, I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. returns to that wide receiver 1 tier. I think a healthier season from him really could remind everyone why he was viewed as that generational prospect. Yeah, it is a messy quarterback situation. But again, if it's Jacoby Brissett, the volume is there because he's going to be slinging the ball 40 times a game. If it's Carson Beck, maybe he lucks out and McBride don't see eye to eye. Well, let's be this connection for Carson Beck. Has a big year. Number 6, I think that potentially, bold take, Puka Nacua could break the 1,800 receiving yards. Okay, he's already threading historic pace. However, I think that this year, the defense being the way that it is, adding Myles Garrett, the offense might be on the field a lot more, guys. A lot more. And I think that that's only going to benefit Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. Okay. Number 7, Teterola McMillan finishes top 8. Okay, double-digit touchdowns firmly are in play, in my opinion. Now, number 8, I think these are the biggest risers in 2026. Okay, 1, I think Devontae Smith. 2 will be Tet McMillan, going from 21 to top 10. Malik Neighbors, I think, could be a big riser this year. George Pickens, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, touch on a few people that we didn't get to. Now, understand Devontae Adams was not on there. I could probably add him in there to the top 20. Kind of missed that one. Also being Tyreek Hill, right? Tyreek Hill's situation, I think he could sneak into that top 15, top 20 role. However, what team? Because where he plays is a big part in that. So until we find out that information, it kind of just left him off the board. Kind of missed out on the Devontae Adams thing, and that's our fault. But just got busy in the writing of it. So now I would, like I said, I would add Devontae Adams into those strong wide receiver 2 with one wide receiver 1 weeks. He led the league in touchdown, guys. 14 touchdowns to be exact. So the production's there. It's just some weeks are going to be better than the others, and if he doesn't score a touchdown, well, then it's not going to be as good of a week as some of the times he was catching 2. So, but yeah, that'll be it for us tonight, guys. I appreciate you. I appreciate you sticking with me the whole time. We're going to check out this chat here real quick before we get out of here. SLM said, which wide receiver outside the top 10 has the best chance to finish as a top 5 receiver this season? For me, so outside the top 10 for us, for me, honestly, I think it's Nico Collins. Just the target share that's there. I do have him ranked at 10. I do have his ceiling at top 5 as wide receiver 5. But honestly, I think that, George Pickens could slide in there. I think that there's a couple that are poised for some big years. Which wide? Oh, yeah, I've already answered that. I'm excited about Schmidt. Yeah, I am too, down south, Philly said. I am as well. I think that he's definitely ready for that role. I think, he's been chomping at the bit to exuminate that role and show that he's here to play. So again, I appreciate everybody tuning in that we had in here tonight. Catch us here on Wednesdays at 6. Facebook, YouTube, follow, subscribe. Appreciate everybody, and we will see you next week, where we are going to do tight end rankings, which it won't be as long because, well, there's just not 30 tight ends to talk about. So we can, but after about 18, we might get a little boring. So tune in next week, 6 o'clock Central Time, to find out where your tight ends are ranked. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and have a great week. Thank you.